Hello, welcome to Citizens for Global Solutions Minnesota. I'm Katia, the president of CGS Minnesota, and I will be moderating this session today. Citizens for Global Solutions Minnesota is a nonprofit organization based in the state of Minnesota in the United States. Every month, we host one of our online projects. Today, it's time for our Human Rights Forum, and our guest speaker will discuss Beyond the Border, human rights principles in the United States immigration. This event is free and open to everybody. If you want to learn more about CGS Minnesota work, please visit our website, www.globalsolutionsmn.org, and follow us on our social media platforms, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook pages. Today, we are hosting the immigration attorney, Flavia Santos Lloyd, founder and manager attorney of Santos Lloyd Law Firm. Immigration attorney Flavia Santos Lloyd is passionate about immigration law and the community she serves. Ms. Santos Lloyd is a certified specialist in immigration and nationality law by the State Bar of California and a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA. She is also a member of the American Bar Association, Orange County and Los Angeles County Bar Associations, Thurgood Marshall Bar Association, Orange County Hispanic Bar Association, among other organizations. And she's an active member of the State Bar in California. Her immigration practice focuses on a broad spectrum of immigration matters, such as family-based, employment-based, extraordinary ability cases, naturalization, adjustment of status, consular processing, asylum, removal, and complex family matters such as waivers. Flavia, thank you for accepting our invitation. Welcome to Citizens for Global Solutions Minnesota, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction and for the invitation. I'm really excited to be here, even though the topic's a little heavy right now with everything that is going on. I think information is everything. So part of this conversation, we have a roadmap, but I think it's important to have a conversation. So feel free to ask questions in the chat. I have a roadmap and I will share the roadmap with you now, but I think because what's happening in the US is so unexpected and so different than what we've experienced before, that I think people will have questions throughout the presentation. So guys, feel free to, jump in throughout the conversation. But let me give you what the main topics, and throughout the presentation, I will be putting links on the chat. So the things I'm referencing, so you can actually go into more depth in that particular topic. So I'll be covering what happens when folks get detained by ICE. I will be discussing updates on asylum law. Again, these are all very broad topics that I could spend an hour on each one of them. So it's going to be very broad. Then I'm going to be discussing, what's going on with work visas and the current situation and how that is affecting people's applications at consulates and here in the United States. We'll also be discussing what happens with folks who are here in the U.S. What are their processes and how those are going along. And then I'll open for questions. And Katia, please feel free to jump in and ask questions. Again, I don't want this to be a monologue, but I'm a lawyer and I have to start with this is not legal advice. This is general educational information, and all the information that I'll be sharing here should not be constituted as legal advice. Now, the key message of this presentation today is that immigration law has always been fast-moving and always has been something that is very dynamic. But the pace that is changing in 2005 is unprecedented. So I think more important than memorizing everything that I'm going to be sharing here today is really know where to find reliable information, where to seek guidance, because our role not just as a lawyer, but as a community member, is to be able to share that information with members of the community and bring that help that we all need right now. All right, so let's get started with the most distressing topic, in my opinion, which is what happens to someone when they are arrested by ICE. Now, I want to start with something very important. When we watch movies, we watch, someone getting detained. We always hear about Miranda rights and your right to remain silent, and a lawyer is going to be provided to you, and all of those things that we associate with detention in the United States. And unfortunately, that does not happen. This is not the case for immigration enforcement and immigration detention. Immigration is governed by civil law. So all of those things, a lawyer will be appointed, you have the right to remain silent. Those are not necessarily applicable. In fact, they are not applicable. And I will distinguish what you can say and what you can't expect from a detention when it comes to civil enforcement, which is immigration enforcement. So that's important to contextualize that. So a few things that the community needs to know. So number one is you have the right to remain silent. I think that's important to start with, knowing that you have rights, even if you are here undocumented. You do not need to answer questions about your immigration status, your place of birth, how you entered the United States, where you work. It's important, guys, because once you do that, you're opening the door for more questions and you're waiving your right. So you cannot say, I am going to answer about my place of birth, but I'm not going to answer about immigration status. So that's a very key difference. You can say, I have this, and I will share the link. I choose to remain silent. I want to speak with a lawyer, even if you are being detained. So this comes from the ACLU Know Your Rights presentation. I am going to put here. Actually, I'm going to put the 3 links that I'm going to be referencing, so that way I'm not copying and pasting, because that's going to be confusing. All right, so I added 3 great resources there. What happens when ICE is at your door? Also, so people know what to expect. Also, knowing your rights in general, because I just did highlight the right to remain silent, but there's more rights that you can, refer to. And the ACLU videos, I think also, videos are always helpful, I believe. So it's important to reference those. And you can share those with the community. Those are good resources. That's why I picked the things that I'm going to be sharing with you today are resources that are helpful, that are trustworthy, and they are not, things that will have misinformation, especially because nowadays there's so much misinformation. So that's number one. The first thing is right to remain silent. Number 2, right to not to sign anything. You don't have to sign anything when ICE is your door, or you were with a judge, or you are in detention. Officers will pressure folks. They will say, you need to sign voluntary departure. No, do not sign anything without speaking to a lawyer or a community organization. That's important. Now, number 3, if ICE is at your door, you do not need to open the door unless ICE has a judicial warrant. That's very important. I've been in the immigration space for 23 years, and I've never seen ICE having a valid warrant. Now, what ICE has, what's called administrative warrant. That's not a judicial warrant. They have this form called I-200 or I-205, and that is administrative warrant. That's not a judicial warrant. You have the right to have your door closed, and you do ask the officer to put that warrant under the door so you can see if it's a valid warrant or not. In fact, in the resources I shared, there is what it looks like, so you guys can have a visual. You can ask, if there's no way to put underneath the door, you can ask to see through a window. The bottom line, once you open that door, you're giving consent. And once you give consent, you cannot walk back. It's just like what I said about not saying anything. Remaining silent means silent. And not opening your door does not mean I'm going to open, I'm going to close. Once the action is the overt action, you cannot take it back. Let's see here. I mean, technically, if you do have you open the door and there's a crack in the door, does not necessarily give ICE the consent to enter, but there's something called the reality and the law, right? So once you have that crack, even though technically you could close the door, this would be very technical, the reality is they're going to push it and they're going to go in. Now, so we covered right to remain silent. We covered right to sign, not to sign anything, even if they pressure you. And when I say sign anything, that can be at the border. This can be at your home. This can be at a detention center. I'm talking about everything. So that's very important that you have that awareness. Talked about what happens when ICE goes to your home. Now, what if someone is detained? What if a family member, what if a member of the community that you know, someone that you feel like, oh my goodness, what can we do for this person? Remember, they have the right to make a phone call to a family member or to an attorney. So folks who are undocumented and even documented right now need to have a phone number that is memorized. So that way, once they are in that vulnerable situation, they're able to reach out to a family member. They also, this is interesting, most folks don't know this, they have the right to receive a list of free or low-cost legal providers at detention centers or ICE detention centers. So that's important. They have the right to have that information. Now, this is the key difference from criminal proceedings. They do not have rights to a court or government-appointed lawyer. You can hire one, but you don't have the right to one. So this is very important. So when someone is detained, they can call a family member, they can call a lawyer, they can get a list of low-cost free legal providers or free legal providers, but they do not have a right of a lawyer, a government-appointed lawyer, like you would in a criminal setting. And finally, when we are talking about not clients, sorry, I'm so used to talk about clients. We're talking about folks who are vulnerable to detention, folks who are undocumented in the United States. Community members need to encourage having emergency contacts, designated person to pick up children, copies of key documents, original key documents as well. If you have passports, make sure that they're valid. Make sure that children are registered in another jurisdiction. So for example, if you are Mexican American and you have your children can have the Mexican passport in addition to the US passport, do so. If you are Brazilian, the same way. So make sure that those documents are available and you have a designated person, because once you are in detention centers, especially if there are children involved, then the Department of Children and Family Services can come in, and that puts children in the system, and it's heartbreaking when that happens. So it's important to have that information available. So I analogize this with estate planning to take the heaviness of the conversation. When we are planning for estate planning and funeral arrangements and how you want to divide up your property, you're not thinking about getting detained. You're thinking about planning. And when I have these difficult conversations with community members, I explain to them, this is not about, oh my God, they're going to pick me up tomorrow. It's just having a plan, especially if you don't have a support system or extended family who could help you. So any questions so far? So again, these are very broad topics, and I'm just giving you, the big picture, and those resources will go into more depth in this particular topic, because I do want to give you the opportunity to ask questions. All right, so that's the main topic, not main topic, but one of the big topics right now, detention. Let's move on to asylum, student visas, work visas. which right now is another very complex topic. Now, just a quick overview of asylum law, again, in a nutshell. Basically, it's a protection for individuals who have suffered or fear persecution based on their race, religion, political opinion, membership in a particular social group. So that is the big framework of asylum. Generally, you have a deadline of 1 year to apply for asylum once you arrive in the United States. Now, there are some exceptions, but the bottom line is the 1 year rule is very set and very clear. Now, for you to apply for asylum, you have to be in the United States. So that's important to have that distinction, because you have the refugee process, which you do overseas, and then the asylum process, where you have to be physically in the United States. And in the US, you have two ways to apply for asylum. One, it's called affirmative asylum. Basically, you're applying that with USCIS, and you're going to an interview in an asylum office. And then there's something called defensive asylum. And that's when someone is in removal proceedings. Now, what is removal proceedings? It's deportation proceedings. So you are in the process of being removed / deported from the United States, and your defense from deportation is the asylum process. Now, what's happening now? Number one, there's a huge backlog. This is before this administration. This is before even the Obama administration. Asylum has always been a long process, and a long process due to backlogs. And at this point, for example, just to contextualize, I have cases from 2015, 2016 that we are waiting for their interviews. So they're waiting. Those are affirmative asylum cases. They're waiting for their day to go to USCIS and present their claim. So there's a huge backlog. Number two, we have constant, almost daily or weekly developments in asylum law in the US. And those are every day more restrictive, more negative, if you will. So, the negative changes. And what do I mean by that? Third country removals. Okay, we cannot send you to Cuba, but we will send you to Mexico. So those are very, very unprecedented. And the negative precedents that basically on a weekly basis weaken the strength of the asylum law that we had in the US. And so groups that were protected and historically things that would work for an asylum claim, that every day is being eroded. Part of the goal here, it's not explicit, but it's really to reinvent, revamp, and undermine asylum law. It's complicated. Another thing here, the credibility requirements have always been difficult. It has always been something to go through an asylum claim. Just for context, guys, when we go to an asylum interview, it's generally, we're talking about 4 or 5 hours of testimony, and the officer questioning the applicant, and you have to have the paperwork submitted way in advance of the interview to really boost that claim. But there's a credibility test here. And that is, sometimes people don't have evidence of their harm or the future harm or the past harm that they fear. And that leads to fraud, that leads to misrepresentation, and the strictness of this process is just getting worse, especially for claims that you don't have evidence. And what do I mean by evidence? Police reports, hospital reports, or newspaper articles about this person's involvement in politics, or proof that this person converted to a religion that is not necessarily accepted in country X, Y, and Z. Sometimes all you have is your testimony. And when you have people going in with already a negative slant towards those cases, that is really something complicated. And something that I always tell folks to be careful with is the idea of going back to their home country. Now, think with me. This is immaterial to administrations, right? If you're saying that you have this fear to return to your home country because you have either your race, your religion, your membership in a particular social group, and then you travel for vacation to your home country, that undermines your claim. So those are some things that I always tell people when we are looking into asylum law or eligibility for asylum. Well, since you came in, did you come back home? Did you have trips back and forth? Because that really weakens the claim. So a few resources about asylum. And again, part of this presentation, I really felt that giving information and giving overview of good resources, and sometimes the good resources comes from the horse's mouth, uh, and I put here even the resources from USCIS, because technically that's, and I say technically because the reality is a little different right now, this is what they're supposed to be upholding, and these are the regulations they should be upholding. All right, so we have here some guidance on asylum. Again, very big overview. Now, another thing that's been making the news, and I decided to pick on the topics when I was speaking to Katya, she shared the topics that are on the news, right? So we talked about ICE going to your home. We talk about asylum and how it's evolving. Now, let's talk about another group that is really under the gun right now, which is students. The numbers don't lie. Foreign students enrollment in the US has significantly declined, and that is a shortage. This is affecting the economy. It's just not affecting the brain drain, which is true because we get talent from everywhere, and we have the biggest founders and the people that make this country great, right? They're now not just coming to the US, and that affects rentals, that affects the economy in general, because these folks bring a lot of money to the economy. And there has been studies in Boston and other cities in the country where this diminishment, this amount of folks that are not coming, how it's impacting local communities. Now, key points about student visas. Folks decide to go to a school in the US. Oh, I see there's a question here. Sorry. Oh, okay. Very good question. And I am going to be touching on those, Matthew. I will be answering that question shortly. Thank you. So basically, this is a nice segue to Matthew's question. So first thing is, folks, select a school. They get admitted and they get a document, what's called I-20. With these documents, they can go to a consular appointment and apply for an F1 visa. There are a lot of requirements. It has to be full-time enrollment. You cannot work unless it's authorized by the United States. You can, USCIS. You have to have a certain financial commitment to be able to come to the US. However, social media is a huge deal for F1 students and any other applicant for whatever visa to the United States. In January 2025, President Trump signed an executive order, and they talked about this extreme vetting. In extreme vetting, we didn't know what it was. They did mention social media. And if someone goes to a consular appointment right now and they have their social media private, that means there will be a delay in their process, because U.S. Department of State, that's the entity that issues visas so folks can come to the U.S., they are analyzing social media. And considering the turmoil and tariffs and political opinions and the country you were born, where you're coming from, and your political affiliation, that has a huge impact on students, because that is part of extreme vetting. We didn't know, as immigration practitioners, as immigration lawyers, we didn't know what extreme vetting meant. We were wondering, what does that mean? Well, it means getting your visa revoked because you made a post that is contrary to the government's positions right now. So they, they are applying for student visas, that means they are full on display, and their political opinions in their home countries and about the US are being analyzed to see if it's consistent with US goals. So it's not to what extent, it's a pervasive, broad spectrum of analysis and folks. And again, this is not just student visas, these are all applicants to all visas. And what do I mean by that? Immigrant visas, meaning you are getting a green card, you're living in the United States. Or non-immigrant visas, if you're coming as a tourist, if you're coming as a student, if you're coming as an H-1B worker. All these folks are subject to extreme vetting, and we've heard during the political assassination, the killing of Charlie Kirk, folks who made comments about Charlie Kirk, and again, this is not a political opinion here, I'm just saying that folks who made comments that were perceived as disparaging of Charlie Kirk, their visas were revoked. And I don't know what the visas were, but we know that someone from Germany, someone from Mexico, someone from Brazil, and there are 2 more countries that I do not remember on the top of my head that actually had their visas revoked based on their political opinion. So it's not even applying for the visa. You can actually get your visa revoked based on that particular, your particular view. Let's see here. I will get to that question. I will just finish the F1 and I will go back to what's happening with ICE and removal proceedings. So for the student visas, did mention, that in some situations they can work on campus, they can work full-time after they're finished their course. And the idea is they invested, right, a lot of money, because sometimes if they pay 5 times or 6 times more than a US citizen, so that investment needs to get some return, right? So they get what's called OPT, optional practical training, that they actually can put into place for a year, work for a year. And normally these folks want to stay, and during that year, they want to apply for the H-1B. Now, before I move to the H-1B, I want to do 2 things. Number 1, add some links for you. I tried as much as possible to make this informative. So here's some information on student visa from the Department of Homeland Security, and also from the Department of State, because that way you can have a broad overview of how this works. But before I move to the next point here, which would be going to from the F to the H, and I'll give you some highlights. I do want to answer this question here because I think it's a very valid question. The question is, what are the ripple effects that you're seeing of ICE detaining immigrants at their court hearings? So there are 2 tracks here of the ripple effects. Number 1, folks are afraid of going to their hearings. They are afraid of doing the right thing, because if you have a notice to appear, if you have a hearing, what are you supposed to do? Show up. But if there's a chance of you getting detained on that day when you are arguably supposed to be presenting your claim, it has a chilling effect. The same way on the F1s and the other visas where you are afraid of posting or commenting on something because that might be perceived as a political speech that is perceived negatively. Folks are afraid of going to court to present their cases. And sometimes we have clients that we tell them, listen, you are eligible, you are not going to be picked up on the court day. But that brings me to the second part of the ripple effect, the psychological trauma. So you have the chilling effect because people are afraid of getting picked up. But then you have the psychological trauma of seeing someone picked up in a court. I am a naturalized US citizen. I have my documents. But does that mean that does not affect me seeing someone getting picked up like the way it's being done? It's not a humane process. And especially because these are folks that are doing the right things. Here's the thing, guys. If you don't go to your hearing, you get deported in absentia. That means you didn't show up. Therefore, you're deported. So it's a terrible catch-22 for folks. If they show up, they might get picked up. But if they don't show up, they're deported, and then they are subject to ICE going to their home to pick them up and deport them. So it is terrible, and the system is so fraught with inequalities. What do I mean by that? So if you are represented by an attorney, I would say 80% of judges allow you to do what's called WebEx. Basically, it's a Zoom where we can have our hearings. But if you are not represented by an attorney, you have to go in person. I want my clients to have the hearings via WebEx because I don't want them to go through the emotional impact of seeing someone else getting picked up. They might not be the ones getting picked up, but seeing someone else might affect their ability to continue with their cases. The idea here is to put so much pressure and emotional toll on folks that they will, just basically self-deport. Sorry for the long-winded response, but I feel that this is an important question, that it is just a really, really complicated thing. And it's just, even for me as a practitioner, I don't want to see folks getting picked up. And sometimes, the other day I was at USCIS, because you see the Department of Homeland Security is the umbrella agency, right? And then you have different agencies underneath it. So I went to USCIS actually yesterday. And when you check in, it's a federal building, so there are several agencies within the building. And you see the folks with the masks and tactical gear. It's intimidating. It's intimidating for me, a naturalized U.S. citizen. Can you imagine if you're applying for a benefit and going through the process? Anyway, I digress here, but complicated. All right, I have just two more topics, and then I have actually one more topic, and then some general questions, the biggest questions I'm getting, and then I'll open for more questions. So remember, I was talking about the F1 students who are here in the United States. They are, investing a lot of money, and they're working, and they're like, well, I want to show that I'm a good employee, and I want to apply for an H-1B. That's another visa that is making the news, and that's why I picked on this one. It's basically, what is an H-1B? It's a work visa. It's not a green card. And it's attractive for employers because you get someone who's really committed to the company. You get someone who will stay with you for 3 years. You can renew for 3 more years. That gives people time to possibly apply for a green card. But basically, the basic requirements for an H-1B is you have to have a bachelor's degree. There is an annual cap, meaning there's a limit of how many H-1Bs can be issued. And there's a lottery. I've been in immigration for quite many years. And back in the day, it was amazing. We would have this unlimited amount of H-1Bs. And then the crisis, the financial crisis came, and that changed. So there's lottery. So it's not an infinite numbers. I think this is important because that's part of the misinformation, right? There's this unlimited number of folks coming every day. No, there's a limitation there. And the employer, not the employee, files the petition. So it's not as if all of these immigrants are coming and getting American jobs without, qualifications. Now, what is the environment today? The environment today on the H-1B space is you have major fee changes, right? You may have major fee changes. Basically, what the government is saying is if you want to bring an H-1B worker from overseas, you have to pay this $100,000 fee. And it's prohibitive to the small business. I'm a small business. If I had to offer, pay the government, not only the fees to the government, the filing fees and the processing fees, but also basically a fine, right? $100,000 fine for an employee is really prohibitive. So that's major fee changes. There's what's called request for evidence. It's basically asking more questions on eligibility of someone's petition, we are seeing a significant increase on those. There's a $100,000 payment is being litigated at this time. We're hoping that it's going to be, eliminated. And there are allegedly, and I'm saying allegedly on purpose, exemptions to this. But the thing is, just like with extreme vetting, we didn't know what it was, right? We didn't know what extreme vetting was. And we don't, now we're finding out. Well, that's the same thing. The exceptions or the exemptions are not clear. They're not spelled out. So we don't know when we have a potential corporate client, well, do I qualify for an exemption because I'm a hospital in a rural area and we need help? I don't know, because it's not clear. And of course, processing delays, because it's not only having the visa nowadays, it's just being able to go to the consulate, because just like the question we had before about the student visas and the social media, that applies to all visas. And nowadays, getting a visa overseas, which used to be a very formal, it's a formality. USCIS, the agency here in the US, has reviewed your petition, has approved it, you're good to go. And then you would go to the consulate if you were overseas to get your visa and come in. That's not the case anymore. Sending someone overseas is dangerous nowadays. I am going to put some information about the H-1B program here. And just again, very broad, very generic information, but I think it's nice to have that understanding, because there is the misconception that people are just coming randomly and applying for jobs and it's a simple process. It isn't. And the government has done a lot of things to protect American workers, which I think is the right thing. So it's not a program that is abused. I mean, sure, there are corporations, then the big ones, that used to abuse this program. And Meta was fined on another program because of abuses, not on the H-1B, but another. So it's important to have that balance, right? The checks and balances, the equilibrium, and make sure that the US workers are not displaced either because of these programs. Now, in a nutshell, so I can have time for your questions and maybe chat with Katia, I just want to go over in the closing thought, how the current processes and policies are affecting visas in general. How is the client? I'm so sorry. How is the climate impacting, visa processing, immigration in general? So first, there's more documentation required. There's more requests for evidence, what's called RFE. They're asking for more questions. And this is across the board, guys. This is not something, it's for the H-1B or for the F-1. No, it's for all visa types, including family types. So if you marry a U.S. citizen, you can apply for a green card. Well, that is something that is going through intense scrutiny right now. Another thing that we are seeing, so stateside, we see what's called requests for evidence. Outside of the US, in the consular level, we are seeing what's called 214B. It's basically a section of the law that consulates can use to deny someone for their interview for a non-immigrant visa, for a student visa, for an H-1B, for an investor's visa. They're using this 214B very aggressively, basically saying that everybody cannot show that they have non-immigrant intent, meaning they want to come to the US with a non-immigrant visa, but then apply for a green card in the future. Certain visas don't allow that. So, as I said before, when we send someone to a consulate, it used to be something, a formality. Oh, you got approved. Now go get your visa and start your life in the US. Not anymore. Number two, another major change, changing USCIS fees and payment methods. Fee increases across the board. Even for asylum cases, which was traditionally no fee, because the asylees were vulnerable and therefore we didn't charge them. Now we are charging even asylees. And some of the costs are becoming, they doubled, they tripled. So the fees are really increased in a significant way. Second thing, when it comes to fees and fee payments, they shifted to electronic payments for many types of applications. And this is completely counterintuitive. There was a study done that about 80% of fees paid to USCIS were done with check and money orders. So guess what we cannot use now to pay USCIS fees? You guessed it right. We cannot use checks and we cannot use money orders. Now imagine if you are overseas with a foreign credit card, cannot pay with that either. So even steps that are administrative, they are there to send a message. We don't want you. It's a terrible way to say it, but those shift to electronic payments, it has nothing to do about convenience. It has nothing to do about helping people because after all, 80% of people paid with checks and money orders. Imagine if you are here undocumented and you don't have a checkbook. So the money order was the way to go. You would go to the post office, you would buy your money orders, and you would pay your fees. So and that's why I'm highlighting it, because those changes are meaningful. They might not seem like a policy change in the sense of changing the law, but they are changing the procedures in a way that will make it more difficult for applicants to, apply for things. Another thing here to close is delays and uncertainty, the backlogs, the fact that longer processing times for stateside processes and consular processing. Someone wants to invest in the US. I'll give an example. I'm thinking of a particular case. This person invested about $200,000 in the US into a business because when you apply for the investor's visa, the money has to be at risk of loss. What does that mean? You bought the computer, you rented the location, you bought the equipment that you were going to be developing your business, right? Well, newsflash, they are eliminating those, they're delaying the issuance of the visa. I have one now that is pending for 4 months, something that used to be 2 weeks. It's 4 months. And this person's money, this person is losing money, and this person is going to generate U.S. U.S. jobs. They are going to be generating tax revenue. They are moving the economy. So it's not just the attack on quote unquote, because I don't like this word, illegal immigration, but it's also attacks on legal immigration. And I think that's a point that a lot of folks don't think about, because we've seen the shift in immigration in general. It's not about one group or another group, it's about all groups. And the final thing I'm here about the delays and uncertainty that we are seeing is that it's difficult to plan ahead and it's difficult to advise folks. It's just like the question we had, what do we do when someone says, I do not want to go to court because I don't want to be picked up at my hearing? So giving advice has become more and more complicated. It's already, difficult to give advice, but something to keep in mind. I do have a few other topics, but I do want to keep, I want to open for questions and a conversation. I can go on. So I just want to check in with Katya and with the audience if you have questions, because I have more and I have, common questions that folks are asking me, but I just want to pause here in a 10:45 mark or 12:45 mark to see where we are.
I do have some questions. I want to hear yours as well, because maybe they are the same and maybe not. So one of the questions that I have received the most all the time is, can a foreign citizen with a valid visa be detained by ICE? The same question for a green card holder and a naturalized immigrant? Can they be?
All right, so those are three categories, right? Someone with a valid visa, someone with a green card, and someone as a US citizen. So I'm going to give you the big umbrella answer that is yes. Why? Because the Supreme Court has basically authorized detention, detain first, ask questions later. The rationale is, oh yeah, once you prove your legal status, we'll let you go. But what we've seen in reports and in the news, that's not really the case. So how someone who is here on a visa can be detained, unfortunately, based on this, the Supreme Court's positioning that ICE can detain you based on you're speaking another language, you have an accent, you look a certain way. I speak English with an accent. So technically, and I'm a US citizen, which is the third category you mentioned, Katya, they can detain me to check my immigration status, and then once they figure out, they let me go. But the thing is, remember when I began the presentation and I said that immigration is not criminal, it's civil. So in a criminal proceeding, you have to be charged within 48 or 72 hours, and you have to be let go. Well, God forbid if I don't have my passport or if I don't have information handy, and they should be accessing their information, I can be gone for a week, two, until they figure out that I'm a US citizen. And that's really the key fear. And this is why that decision of the positioning of the Supreme Court is so scary, that it allows this particular, opening. And this happens on the first bucket, folks who are here legally. We've seen this with the Tufts student, Remissa, who I don't remember her last name now, Ortzurk, who wrote a piece and an op-ed in the Tufts University, and she was here valid with a valid F1 visa. And again, I'm giving you the ones that are on the news, but there's many more. Second one, we also have the gentleman from Columbia University. I don't remember his name now. I'm forgetting all the names. But he had a green card. He was married to a U.S. citizen. He missed the birth of his child because, again, his political opinion was not in line with what the administration feels that is the right, American policy. And they are trying to take his green card away. So he was detained. And the third bucket of folks, and that we are seeing a lot on the news, and it's being quantified and tracked by several organizations, including academic institutions, are the US citizens who look a certain way, who speak a certain way, or who may be speaking another language. And because of that, they are detained, and until they figured out their immigration status, they get detained. So the bottom line is have, proof of your status, your immigration status, because that's crucial. I'm a US citizen. I have a US passport, but I do not carry it with me. What I did is I ordered a US passport card because that's how concerned I am, because I do speak with an accent. So I ordered a US passport card so I can have it in my wallet, just like my ID, my California ID, to show that, hey, I'm legal, quote unquote. Can I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else, guys? Otherwise, I'll jump in through some common questions. Any other questions, Katya?
No.
All right. So let's see here. A few questions that I will highlight just for that I did not cover in the presentation, but public charge. Public charge is something that is also making the news. Now, let me give you some backdrop here. The idea here is you are here on a non-immigrant visa, a work visa or a student visa, or you're here as a green card holder. You're not a US citizen, meaning you have rights, but you also don't have full rights, right? And the government created this idea that we don't want folks who will become public charge. Now, during the shutdown, we all heard about undocumented folks getting federal benefits. That's not possible. That's just not legally possible because of public charge rules. Now, if they have U.S. citizen children and the U.S. citizen children qualify for SNAP or for any public benefit, that's different. But the immigrant themselves or the undocumented folks, they have no ability to get public benefits. And I gotta go back to the idea of you're getting a benefit of living in the United States and you're working in the United States, and there are some things that should be reserved for U.S. citizens. That's the backdrop. There's, if you're getting a green card, there's a form that you sign. Basically, whoever's giving you the green card, the petitioning family member, is like making a commitment that you are not going to use the public assistance. So this is very important. There are guardrails and there is some, mechanisms to, I will talk about that question. It's another good question. But so there are things in the public charge that, it's important to safeguard the citizenship rights. So during the first administration, Trump 1.0, there were issues with public charge. The courts struck down because some of the measures were really extreme. Then we went back to quote unquote normal, which is again still protecting U.S. citizen rights. This is very important, and limiting non-immigrant and green card holders to certain benefits from the government. And now there's an expansion of public charge again. So we'll see how that's in development, and we'll see how that's going to be applied. But I foresee a stricter, a harsher analysis of the possibility of folks becoming public charge. In fact, there was a publication by Reuters last week saying that the Department of State is floating the idea of normal diseases be considered something that would affect your ability to get a visa. So let's say you're obese, let's say you have high blood pressure, let's say you have diabetes, things that never were considered as a potential for public charge and the basis for denial of a visa or a benefit in the United States. Secretary Rubio is floating that notion. And normally when Reuters or the AP publish something, we know that it's going to happen and happen soon. But to touch on a question that I think is very relevant, and I want to possibly, tie this conversation with this one, going back to citizenship. The question is, Trump has threatened to strip the citizenship of a naturalized citizen. Are there any legal grounds to do this? Now, denaturalization always existed, okay? It has always existed. There's a basis for denaturalization, but it's an extremely complex proceeding. It's not something that it can be done like this. I've seen Rosie O'Donnell and a few other folks that their names were floated around as, I'm going to take Rosie O'Donnell's citizenship. No, it's not like that. It's an extremely complex process. It's a judicial proceeding. It's not just immigration. You have to actually go to court, district court. So it's not something that can be done on a whim. Now, there is a focus on denaturalization, and that's true. The denaturalization unit in Los Angeles has expanded significantly. Now, who do we see being denaturalized? Folks who were part of genocide or terrorism. They lied on their application for residency, but lied in a significant way. It's not lying about their income or something that is still serious. I'm not advocating for people to lie on their applications, but there is material misrepresentations and not material misrepresentation. When the government actually is looking for denaturalizing someone, we're looking at someone who has been part of, human trafficking, killings. It has to be something significant. So the answer is, from a legal standpoint, it's extremely hard. From a practical standpoint, have we seen the expansion and the abuses of our judicial system, and the idea of presidential power going beyond the norms and the expectations of the United States? The answer is yes. So we'll see how that plays out. But I do have faith in the courts. The lower courts are the federal courts, the district courts. They are really pushing back into the expansion of presidential power, because that will be really an expansion if we are going to override not just precedent, but the legality that is in place right now. There's one more question here, and I want to answer that question. Let's see here. A person with expired visitor visa now is married to a U.S. citizen. Do you mean if this person can apply for a green card? Do you mean if this person is going to be detained at their green card interview? Can you specify? Because normally, Diane, if a person with an expired visitor visa, they were admitted and inspected, and they haven't committed any crimes, and they haven't misrepresented anything, they can apply for what's called adjustment of status. They would adjust from being, B2, B1 expired to green card holder. So I'm not sure what the idea would be, but generally those people would be able to apply for a green card, no problem. I went to one case yesterday, just like this, B2 expired, tourist visa. The tourist visa expired. She married a U.S. citizen, and we went to the green card interview. Now, there are offices in the U.S., and San Diego is one of them, where these folks who were not subject to detention, that's been a long-standing procedure, have been detained in the past few weeks. We are waiting and seeing. The American Immigration Lawyer Association, AILA, is very involved. We are tracking this trend. I am in Newport Beach, so I'm running between LA and San Diego. That's really concerning. But I went to one in LA, and the officer says, "Oh no, she's gonna be fine." But it was it's stressful, and I guess goes to what I was mentioning to Matthew's questions earlier: the chilling effect. It's the fear of telling clients that some clients, I just don't want to apply because they are afraid of getting picked up at the interview. So anyway. I will pass to, I hope, answer your question, Diane and Matthew. Thank you for your questions, and I will bring Katya to, bring this home.
Yes, and I have 3 last questions. It would
All
be
good
to stay with you the rest of the day, but I know it's not possible. But first question, I will ask all of them at once. So what advice would you have for students who want to work in immigration or human rights law? What would be the advice for the community? We also have a lot of people from different states, and some people that are outside of the United States but are citizens. What would be your advice for the community if they want to help in any way the immigration situation? But last question is about you. Is there a moment from your career that made you think, this is why I do this work?
All right. Advice to students. I had to write my cheat sheet. All right. Advice to students. Be careful with your opinions. I mean, it's terrible to say, especially because the land of the free and First Amendment and free speech, no matter where we're from. I mean, I remember growing up in Brazil and watching the American movies, right? We have this image of the United States that's being challenged right now. So my advice to students is, number one, be careful with your opinions. Be careful with what you're posting. Be careful with what you're saying. Be careful with your activism, which is, again, it's terrible. I'm not saying that I like the advice I'm giving, okay? And the final advice to students is, if you travel, make sure you are 100% fine. And what do I mean by that? Make sure what you have, look at the WhatsApp groups you're in. Look at your computer. Make sure that there are no status violations. Because here's the thing, guys: when you are at an airport or a land border, you have last constitutional rights. It's called the national security exemption. Basically, the government can ask to look at your computer. The government can ask to look at your phone. So nowadays, things that were more, laid back, no big deal, it is a big deal. So when you travel, I'm telling my folks, if you were my client, a student, if you're a student on F1 visa, I say sit tight and stay in the US. Don't travel. But I understand that's not feasible. The holidays are coming up. I understand people want to go home. In Minnesota is really cold. And I understand, like I want to travel. But be careful with travel. Uh, and if you want to stay, if you want to have a career path, just plug away. A lot of these things will be challenging in court. So my message is hopeful. Don't quit. Don't say, I'm just going to leave. I'm not going to stay here. I think things will get better. Maybe it's the Pollyanna in me, but things will get better. To the community, my message to the community is get involved, get engaged. Part of the reason I put the American Immigration Council, I put ACLU, they want the community. They want the community involved from an active standpoint. Go distribute know your rights cards, the red cards, I would call it, red cards in your community. If you cannot be active, be a passive, give $5 to these organizations. Again, I'm not a lobbyist for anyone, okay? I'm just saying, uh, get out there, help these organizations, because these organizations can do things that I cannot do as a small business owner. I cannot devote my time to full-time, know your right presentations. I do a lot of them, but if we can help these organizations, that would be my message to the community, either actively teaching the community, participating into things like today, where you're getting information from reliable resources so you can share with your community partners, or give money. $5 matter, $1 matters. This is really, there's organizations need to the support of the community to bring the big class actions that someone like me cannot afford to do it. And finally, the point of my career, gosh, this is a difficult question. Sometimes I do want to quit, but I love what I do. So I do love immigration. I do love what I do. And, if there's a highlight, it's to me like yesterday with this couple, where they were very anxious and they were very tense. But being able to be there, not just from a legal perspective, but as a human being, helping someone navigate a very difficult and complex process that I had to go through myself. I think that's a pretty cool job. And I think it's a pretty cool thing. And now we cannot just be lawyers, but we can be members of the community. We can be friends. We can be more of that. And I think to me, that's the highlight of the career. When Trump 1.0 happened, I said we became better lawyers, we became better writers, we became better fighters. Now, this is a little bit too far, actually, a lot too far for me, but I still have the same mentality. I never done a habeas corpus petition in my life. Well, I'm learning about habeas because I know that at some point my client's going to be detained and I need to be ready. So that motivates me. It's just to be able to challenge myself for the benefit of others. Anyway, that was a long-winded response.
That's a beautiful response. Thank you so much. And on behalf of CGS Minnesota, I want to thank you all for attending this event. If you want to watch again, the recording of this discussion can be found on our website and our YouTube channel. CGS hosts events every month. Please check our website for updates. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at cgsmn.contact@gmail.com. Flavia, on behalf of CGS Minnesota, we extend our heartfelt thank you to you, to your office, for your enlightening and deeply impactful presentation on immigration. The insights you shared are invaluable, especially as our country navigates pivotal changes that will shape our collective future. We are truly grateful for your time, expertise, and commitment to immigration and human rights. Please stay in touch. And we look forward to continue the collaboration. It's been fun and so lovely. Thank you, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for participating, for the questions, great questions, and thank you, Katya and CGS Minnesota, for the opportunity to, discuss and get to know each other too. Thank you.
Thank you.